Jungle is the role that everyone tells you is the most difficult. It's the role where no matter what you do in the game, you're going to be the reason that your teammates lost their lane 1v1, the role where you're constantly being forced to make decisions around ganking, pathing, and objectives, while everybody else can just chill in their lanes, and it's the role that for some reason is expected to be everywhere on the map all at once. There's no denying it might deter quite a few people from playing it, especially if you're newer to the game. But here's the truth that nobody wants to tell you. Jungle is without a doubt the most rewarding role in the entire game to learn, and dare I say, the easiest to climb on. And that's all for one very simple reason. No other role comes even remotely close to giving you this much impact on the outcome of a game. Plus, there's a pretty easy workaround to the majority of what makes jungling so dang nerve-wracking, right? And the best part about all this is once you know the basics, it's actually way easier to pick up than everybody makes it seem. And by the end of this video, you're going to have everything that you need to feel confident in the jungle, as we're going to be covering everything from the best beginner-friendly champions to start your journey with, how to clear your camps, how to path and plan your jungle route, when and how to gank, how to balance your time, everything you could ever need to know about taking objectives, and so much more. At which point, once you got all those basics locked in, you are going to be ready to take it all one step further. As over at SkillCapped, we're excited to announce we just dropped our brand new 5-part Season 16 Jungle Essentials course, which takes everything you could ever need to know about the jungle and condense it into simple, easy-to-digest lessons guiding you through the early, mid, and late game. Taught in a way where, above all else, it's actually useful and applicable in your games, regardless of your rank and how your team plays. And listen, we're so confident that you'll improve and improve fast, we went ahead and proved it, as we took a player who literally hadn't even touched League of Legends before and took them all the way to Diamond in just 90 days using only our jungle courses. And best of all, we documented the entire journey, so you can follow along watching as a real beginner uses the exact same lessons available to you, all the problems they encountered with applying them, how they overcame them, the tilt sessions, my god, the breakthrough moments, everything. And all of this and more is waiting for you right now at skillcapped.com. And best of all, if you don't climb at least an entire division when actively using our service, you get every penny back. Continue your journey today, completely risk-free, using the link in the description or pinned comment below. All right, back to the video. So before we get into anything else, you need a champion, and if you're new to jungle, what you pick is going to be incredibly important. The wrong champion could literally make your life hell. Everything from clearing your jungle to ganking is just going to be a whole lot harder than it needs to be. So here is our suggested picks to get you started. Our first suggestion is going to be Warwick. If you're a complete beginner, he's really about as perfect as it gets. Basically, he's the training wheels of jungle champions, and the reason for that is all down to his W. Whenever an enemy champion drops low on health, you're going to gain a trail leading right to their location and a massive movement speed boost towards them. So you can literally focus on clearing, and when a good gank opportunity appears, the game's going to tell you about it. Warwick's just going to let you know. Outside of that, he has a super simple jungle clear, amazing dueling potential, beating most champions in a 1v1, and just overall solid ganks, especially once he hits level 6. Now that said, if you're a little bit more experienced at League as a whole, then one of the first problems you're going to encounter is time management. Gank too much, you're going to end up falling behind in experience and gold. Farm too much, and you aren't going to be impacting the map nearly as much as you should be, which is where a second jungle champion really comes into play, and that is Nocturne. Nocturne is perfect for anybody learning jungle, as his goal is the same every single game. Farm till you reach level 6, then gank a lane with your ultimate every time you have it available. And as you can literally fly across half the map directly to your target, it makes executing ganks completely brain dead. If anybody steps too far up in their lane or is low on health, just hit R, fly across the map towards them and assassinate them. Then go straight back to farming and repeat once you have it available again. And lastly, if you prefer to have that big impact in team fights, or you like to play more of a tank role for your team, we suggest trying out Amumu. Amumu surprisingly does a ton of damage for how tanky he is, and much like Nocturne, is a champion that just wants to farm and hit level 6. Only Amumu's power, rather than looking for picks, is all about team fighting due to his massive AoE ultimate, which definitely has the potential to completely 1v9 any team fight if it's used well. Not to mention, as his Q is both a stun and a gap closer with 2 charges, his ganks and engage potential, they are insane at all points of the game. So now that we have our champions out of the way, it's time to get into the game. The first thing we need to talk about here is the new role quests that were introduced with Season 16. But don't worry about that, this is pretty straightforward, it's not crazy. So to start, you're going to be automatically assigned the Jungle role quest and Summoner spell Smite, which is unique to junglers at the start of every game. Then, once you purchase one of the 3 starter pets, a choice that should definitely feel really familiar to anyone who grew up gaming, you're going to notice there's a number on it in your inventory. This starts at 35. For every jungle monster that you kill, one of these 35 stacks is going to be consumed. We're basically going to be feeding our starter pet by killing jungle camps. Once you've fed that 15 times, your Summoner Smite will then upgrade, increasing the damage it deals to monsters from 600 to 1000, which also enables you to then use it on champions for some very minor damage, but more importantly for a slow, which can be great for helping with ganks. Then, once you feed your pet another 20 times, filling that 35, your starter jungle item in your inventory is going to be consumed and your role quest will be completed, upgrading your Smite yet again, increasing the damage it deals to 1400 as well as making it AoE. But don't worry about remembering any of these values, as the damage your Smite deals is always going to be displayed above your HUD right here. You also gain some other benefits, including some extra gold and experience from your jungle camps and bonus movement speed when in the river or your jungle. Basically what these do is it just incentivizes you to clear your jungle, which you need to be doing anyway for experience and gold. Now, after hearing all of this information about role quest, your brain's probably working overtime, and I get it. You think you should just prioritize all of this as quickly as possible and focus only on farming camps. Well, the most important thing here is you don't need to rush this or even really think about it other than knowing the rewards of all of this. This is because there's a built-in catch-up mechanic called treats. Basically, if you haven't killed a jungle camp in a while, you gain treats that can be seen as a buff here above your HUD, and you consume these treats to remove those extra stacks on your starter jungle item. Anyway, after reaching 0 stacks on that jungle pet, the final benefit is you gain a buff unique to whichever starter pet you opted for. Blue is going to provide you with extra movement speed whenever you kill a camp or enter a brush, and for a short period after. Red is going to stack up over time, and it causes your next attack or ability to do some minor damage and slow the target. And green gives you a minor shield that refreshes every time you kill a jungle camp or stay out of combat. Honestly, in Season 16, you really can't go wrong with any of these, and if you're just starting out, feel free to experiment with all 3 of them and just see what you prefer. But if you just want an easy answer and you want me to tell you what to do, always buy blue. Movement speed's going to be a great pick. Okay then, we got our champion and we know all about our little companion. Next up, let's talk about the jungle and the camps inside of it. Jungle camps are essentially the jungler's form of minions, with there being 6 different camps in total. These are the same every single game, they don't change, and always spawn in the exact same location that you can see highlighted by these little icons on your minimap. Each team's jungle is divided into 2 quadrants, which are known as the blue side and red side, named after the important buffs inside of them that when killed provide special buffs displayed by the aura below your feet. The blue quadrant for both teams contains the blue sentinel that when killed is going to give you a buff that provides a ton of mana or energy regeneration, as well as giving you shorter cooldowns on your abilities known as blue buff, as well as the gromp, which is the ugly frog thing, and then wolves. Whereas the red quadrant contains the red brambleback, which when killed gives you the aptly named red buff, which causes your attacks to slow and do some damage over time. And then you have the raptor camp and krugs, which when killed spawn little baby krugs. Lastly, there's also another monster in the river separating your own and the opponent's jungle called the scuttle crab, with one spawning on the top side of the map and one spawning on the bottom. That, when killed, drop a circle that provides bonus movement speed and vision in the river for a short period. Now don't worry, none of these camps have any special mechanics or things you have to be aware of when you take them. Every one of them are just as easy to kill as the next one. And in modern day League, clearing your jungle is so incredibly easy that practically any champion could do it. But there are definitely a few extra jungle mechanics and settings that you need to be aware of. First, when you pull up to a camp, you're going to notice this little faint circle surrounding it. This is the leash range of the camp. If the camp leaves that circle, a timer is going to start, and after 4 seconds, the camp's going to reset, run back to its spawn, and begin to quickly heal up to full. You can see this by this thin little white patience bar above the camp's health. You'll very quickly learn that the faster you can clear your jungle, the more time you're going to have for everything else. And that's why clear speed is one of the biggest areas jungle mains focus on improving, as it is insanely valuable as you clear your jungle countless times each and every game. game. And now you're going to see this in how they kite every camp to the very edge of its leash range while clearing. And at the highest level, players min-max this even further than that, finishing camps just outside that leash range as they move toward their next camp, which is all just about increasing the speed of your overall clear by reducing the downtime spent traveling between camps and the overall damage you take. But listen, as a beginner, do not feel like you need to worry about any of that yet. You can safely just stand exactly where that camp spawns and kill it without even moving and still clear completely fine. This is largely down to how that jungle pet works. Every time you hit a camp, your pet's going to attack twice and deal some AoE damage. This makes taking camps like raptors or wolves a lot easier, as you can primarily just focus down the main monster while your pet kills all the rest. Not only that, but they also massively reduce your damage taken, they restore health and mana, and even give you bonus experience. Anyway, every camp, once killed, has a respawn time of 2 minutes and 15 seconds, with the two exceptions to this being the red buff and the blue buff that I talked about earlier, which spawn every 5 minutes. Now, luckily though, you really don't have to remember any of this, as by going into the practice tool, opening settings, navigating to interface, and then scrolling down until you see minimap, you're going to be able to turn on the setting enable all minimap timers. This gives you easy to read timers on your minimap, so you can always see exactly when all those jungle camps are going to respawn. Now, before this tool in the menu, tracking camp timers usually required third-party tools, but now the game shows it for you automatically. Super easy. Having these timers just makes jungling feel a whole lot less stressful. But there's still one big thing that intimidates a ton of new junglers: knowing what order to clear those camps in. But there's a really simple solution to this. When you load into a game, make sure you click this button here next to your minimap. Riot pulls data from the millions of games being played on your champion and shows you the exact route the majority of players are using, with this glowy yellow diamond being where you start and the gray circle being your next camp. And you can pretty much just follow that and be good to go for the majority of the games that you play in. But even in general, pathing is incredibly simple. There's 3 main clears, all of which just involve clearing your full jungle. That's what that means, just in a slightly different starting order for each one. You either start on blue buff, smiting when it drops to 600 HP, and then clear Gromp into wolves, then pass into the next quadrant and clear raptors, red, and then finally Krugs. Or start on your red buff, again smiting as it drops to 600 HP, then do Krugs into raptors, cross over and do wolves into Gromp into blue buff. Essentially, all you're doing is starting at one of the major buffs in a quadrant, killing all of those camps there, then just transitioning through mid lane into the other quadrant and killing all the camps there. The third clear worth talking about here is just a little bit different, as it's more optimal on select champions like Amumu, as your goal on them is to reach level 6 as fast as possible. This one starts on raptors rather than your buff, then walks past red and does Krugs, before going back to red and using smite, then crosses over between your mid lane 2 turrets and does wolves into Gromp into blue. The reason for doing this one is to just get your raptors and Krugs respawning faster, which allows you to go into your second full clear just a little bit sooner. And that's really all you have to know about this, as you, the enemy jungler, and even the majority of high-level players are going to be doing one of these 3 clears in 99% of games, as it's just the most effective and efficient thing that you can do. Regardless of which of these 3 clears you opt for though, after killing all 6 camps, you're going to be level 4 with both your red and blue buff and your second charge of smite available. And this is where you want to venture from your last camp into the river and take the scuttle crab. This spawns at 2 minutes and 55 seconds, which is typically around the time that you should be finishing up your final camp, depending on how fast you were. From here though, you have a choice to make. If you don't see anybody around, you can just take the scuttle crab using your smite when it drops to just below 600 health. However, if you and the enemy jungler both ended up pathing that same way, you're going to end up running into them in the river. If you feel confident in fighting them, you can go ahead and fight them over it. Otherwise, you could simply just let them have it and walk down to the other scuttle crab instead. That said, this is another reason why our suggested champions, especially Nocturne and Warwick, are so incredibly strong here, as they're both great duelists and will in most cases come out ahead in that 1v1 at scuttle crab. And look, if you're interested in learning more about your jungle clear and how to actually improve it, we have an entire course dedicated to teaching the fastest clears for every single champion, with helpful subtitles to help guide you through every single step of the way, even at the bare minimum, allowing you to shave 10 seconds off that very first clear and every one after. But with the 3 main routes discussed now, you may have noticed that that you start on one side of the map and naturally end your clear on the other side after your scuttlecraft. This is actually really important, as deciding where you start is the first decision you're going to need to make every single game. And the logic behind this single decision is so simple. Start on the opposite side to where you want to end up, which depends on which lane you want to gank first, which brings us to the biggest issue you're going to encounter as a new player. Who should that even be? There's over 170 champions in League, and the amount of possible matchups is absolutely ridiculous. There's players who play this game at a professional level who don't even know the ins and outs of every matchup. So how on earth are you, as a new player, supposed to know this? Well, there's a super simple way to think about this. Even if you have absolutely no League knowledge at all and you are brand new to the game, and this is the first video you're watching about this, at a basic level, every champion in League can be categorized as either melee or ranged. And once you understand that and see it as that simple, you can already start making surprisingly good decisions about this. Here's why. Melee champions have to walk up to last hit minions. And when a lane is melee versus melee, both players are constantly forced to get close to each other because they're melee, which typically makes those matchups far more volatile because they're close. Because of that, when you see a melee versus melee lane, it's usually going to be a great idea to path towards that, since fights have a higher chance of breaking out. Now, on the other hand, if you have two ranged champions, neither side has to get close to farm the minions, and for the most part, can look to play safe, which makes them far less volatile and thus harder to gank. But what if it's a ranged versus melee champion? Well, these are equally as important to be aware of, as how these lanes will typically go is that the ranged champion, at least early on, is going to be able to abuse their range advantage to bully and harass the melee champion. Usually this results in the ranged champion pushing and playing on their opponent's side of the lane to harass and poke under turret. So the answer is simple. If you have a melee teammate who's against a ranged champion, you should almost always path towards them, especially as generally melee champions tend to have either good crowd control or gap closers to follow up on or even set up your gank. And this same idea carries over to bot lane as well, as when looking at bot lane, even though it's going to typically always be range versus range in the ADC's department, a simple thing to do is to instead only pay attention to the support picks, exactly like we see here. Jarvan has an Alistar support, a melee champion, up against Sona, who's ranged. Because of that range difference, Sona and her ADC, as we mentioned, will typically have the early advantage in lane, meaning they're far more likely to push up and harass under turret. Now, although since Alistar is melee, like most other melee champions, he brings either good engage, gap closers, or crowd control, making him perfect at setting up ganks. And what do you know? By the time Jarvan finishes his clear and gets down there, Sona and her ADC are pushed up. Alistar sets up the gank, and they get a free kill on the enemy Sona. So, as you can see, even with just the most basic understanding of knowing whether a champion is ranged or melee, you can already make some pretty informed decisions. And this is something that will only improve over time the more and more you play, as you learn more about the champions in general, or even just different champion archetypes like bruisers and tanks, at which point you could then adjust your pathing based on other factors as well. So anyway, now that you're confident with clearing your jungle, how to path, and even deciding where to start, it's time to talk about how to actually execute the gank properly to likely score a kill, or at the very least, blow a flash. The very first thing you want to look for is pushing waves. Before heading into a lane, take a quick look at the state of the minions. If the enemy minions are too close to their tower, a gank is very unlikely to work unless your opponents are already low on health. However, if the enemy wave is far away from the safety of their own tower, this is going to typically be a great opportunity to look for a gank, as they need to push up further down the lane. And this is basically what you're going to be looking for in order to set up those ganks. This is because your ganks are going to have a much higher chance of being successful if you're able to get behind them, or if you have a long time to chase them down the lane. Either way, the next step from here is to cut them off. Newer players to jungle will instinctively just run directly at their opponent, but this is wrong. When an opposing player sees you, their standard response is to retreat directly towards their turret. This is why your goal should be to completely cut off that escape path instead, as this is going to massively increase the chances at scoring a kill. Then, to further build on this, don't always use your abilities instantly, especially your gap closers in CC. For example, we have Jarvan here looking for a gank on the pushed up Annie in mid lane. He walks directly at her and instantly uses his EQ combo, to which Annie Annie just flashes and then retreats. Now compare that to if he instead just holds his EQ combo. He can just cut off Annie's path, like we mentioned, deal damage with his auto attacks, and then save his combo for once Annie is forced to use her Flash Summoner spell, giving her absolutely no room to escape. And speaking of Flash, this is yet another huge indicator for when a lane is worth ganking. Flash is the single most important escape tool in the game, so when an enemy laner has already used it, they suddenly become far easier to punish for up to 5 minutes. Even if everything else about the lane looks neutral, a missing Flash alone can be enough to turn an average gank into a guaranteed one. Laners, they're going to usually press tab and spam click their opponent's Flash whenever it's used, creating the perfect opportunity for you to look for a gank. And of course, this also works the other way around. When you force a Flash, hit tab, left click the summoner icon next to the champion, and using the in-game timestamps, you'll have a somewhat accurate timer until it's back by just adding 5 minutes. And for a bonus tip here, you could even hit Z on your keyboard and expand the chat to double check any timers. So hopefully by this point you can see that jungling really isn't as complicated as people really make it out to be, at least at a basic level. Most of what we've covered so far is stuff that you should really feel confident to start applying immediately, even in your very first game. But now, we're moving on to the single most important concept that every jungler needs to understand, and honestly, the hardest part of the role as a whole, and that's managing your time. Now don't worry too much, as there's actually a few super simple rules here you can follow to ensure you're always making good use of your time and making the correct decisions. The one thing you have to understand is that your time as a jungler is split into two: clear time and free time. But first, let's talk about rule number 1 here. Always be at your camps as close to their respawn as possible. So if you start blue buff and then do Gromp and clear down for your starting route, after you take Scuttle, you're going to have just under a minute until that Gromp respawns. This is your free time, so you can look for a gank bot lane or even just base and run top for a gank. But regardless of how we use any of that free time, our goal is to get to that Gromp by that timer. Then, once we start Gromp, we enter clear time. Once we start clear time, we stick to it, where you want to take the rest of your camps in sequence. And this is really just repeating that starting route, but without the buffs, as they won't be up yet, which will make the whole process a whole lot faster, especially as you now have more items. And again, after you kill Krugs, you're back in free time. So exactly the same as before. We can look for a gank bot, or mid, do Drake, or even just base and head top. Only this time, we have far more free time until our respawning camps are back. See, the reason this rule exists is that you honestly can't really go wrong with it. Sure, you may not make the best possible decision every single time, but the reality is nobody ever does. This rule is in place to stop you falling massively behind, as it removes the two biggest pitfalls that junglers fall into. First is falling behind in gold and experience. The faster you clear a camp, the faster it respawns, and the more overall gold and experience you're going to get. So, with that in mind, if you again do the standard full clear starting at blue buff that we just mentioned, and then base and head back to bot again for a gank, or maybe to do dragon, maybe the play doesn't end up working out. Well, now you're on the complete opposite side to your now active camps. So you're either going to have to base again and run up, or just skip clearing them entirely and do your bot side camps instead and backtrack. Only now, you've just wasted a ton of time for potentially nothing. The second problem is desyncing your camps. This is largely why once you start clear time, you stay in clear time until your jungle is cleared. Again, let's say you head to your Gromp immediately on respawn, kill it, and then go to look for a gank top. Well, again, if it doesn't work out, you have to backtrack all the way to your wolves to continue your clear. And equally as bad, the next time your Gromp respawns, your wolves are going to be out of sync again. So we just have to wait around or just delay entering clear time. This is generally the sign of a good jungler, as if you're doing things right, your clear pattern should repeat every single cycle. Anyway, these are super simple rules, and especially as a beginner, we strongly recommend following them as closely as possible. And like we said, it may not always result in you making the best choice in every single situation, as all of this would be impossible to teach in one single beginner video. The point of our guidelines here is to make sure that you're always doing something decent no matter what. But if you do want to learn how to adapt your decisions based on all the other factors happening in the game, we do have an entire chapter dedicated to teaching you exactly when and why you should be breaking these rules. Now though, once you understand how to manage your time, the next thing you need to know is how to begin playing around objectives properly. Except, not really. This is the area where most junglers go wrong, and they think they need to be at and secure every single objective in the game. But first, let's cover the objectives themselves. So in this video, for complete beginners, to make things a whole lot easier for you, we're just going to cover the ones you can take yourselves: Dragons, Void Grubs, and Herald. So starting with Dragon. Dragon spawns at 5 minutes and can be one of 6 different elemental drakes. Killing each gives a different buff, which we're going to put on screen for you right now. An important thing to note about dragons, though, is the buffs themselves are honestly pretty minimal. What makes dragons strong, and the whole point of them, is to stack up 4, which will give you the Dragon Soul, a massive buff based off the random element that happens in that specific game. As a jungler, you can secure the dragon as early as level 5, even on spawn, completely solo. Now we're going to talk about when you should do objectives in just a moment, but just know they're pretty easy to take, even if it does take a little bit of time. And also, while we're here, please don't worry if the enemy jungler gets an early dragon. As we said, the individual buffs, they really don't matter, and it's fine to concede a few of them along the way. Up next is Void Grubs. These spawn at 8 minutes in the top side pit and give your team extra damage to turrets to help you take plates. If you get all 3, you'll also spawn these little Void Mites, which do some extra damage and help tank a few turret shots. Again, there's not much to take in these, and any jungler can pretty much safely solo it if you're uncontested. Then at 15 minutes in the same pit, Rift Herald is going to spawn, and now this is really the only jungle monster with a slight mechanic to it, as once you DPS it down, you're going to spot an eye open on her back, at which point you wait for her to either charge or auto, and then loop behind and hit the eye. This does some bonus damage and speeds up the kill considerably. You'll then want to pick up the eye that she drops, which will replace your trinket keybind, which you can then summon, jump inside, and steer into a turret for some big damage. Now the objectives themselves are not complicated. The difficult part is learning when you should take them. Many of the low elo community believe that junglers are solely responsible for taking objectives, and whether the team gets them falls onto them. However, while it is your responsibility to secure it with your Summoner Smite, as it deals a huge amount of damage, the truth is that objectives are without a doubt a team effort, and you really only want to start them when you have an advantage or is really easy to do so. There's 3 common timings to look out for here. First, if the enemy jungler shows up on the other side of the map, this means you have ample time to grab either objective completely free, as there's no way they could get to you in time. Second, your laner closest to that objective has priority. This just means that they push the wave into the opposing turret, which means they now have free time while their opponent is stuck last hitting under turret, so they can freely move to come and help you. And third, after a successful team fight or gank, if you all still have high enough health and don't need to base yet, converting a gank or a team fight win into an objective is always going to be the safest way to secure one. And that's it. Don't put any more pressure on yourself other than that when it comes to objectives, at least as you start out. You'll naturally get a feel for when it just makes sense to do an objective, and outside of that, just try to get some early ones if you can. Otherwise, as the game progresses, you're going to end up grouping and taking them as a team far more often anyway. And this right here brings us to our final topic: invading. Your opponents obviously have their own side of the jungle, and yes, you can go in there and steal away some of their camps. This is extremely valuable to do so, and yet another reason why we massively advocate for being at your respawning camps on time, as that way this cannot happen to you. But think of it this way: every camp you steal from the enemy jungler is not only an extra camp for you, but it's one less for them, effectively doubling the value for each camp you manage to steal. But of course, it's risky to do this, as you could obviously potentially encounter the enemy jungler or even get collapsed on by their entire team. This is why, when starting out, you should apply the same rules to invading as we just explained for objectives. Above all else, you really have to have an advantage or a reason before you invade. The simplest example again here would be the enemy jungler showing on the opposite side of the map, as if they didn't follow our rules, there's a potential that their camps are up or spawning on the other side. Or, if you're already stronger than your opponent, this is going to be how you further your lead. If you feel confident you win the 1v1, you can move into their jungle and fight them over their camps. And lastly, just as a little bonus here, one thing that almost no one talks about when learning jungle is just how mentally demanding this role really is. The biggest hurdle for jungle is seriously just having the mental fortitude required to stick to your decisions, even when your team is constantly making you second guess yourself. But as a jungler, your teammates are going to often expect you to be everywhere all at once. You could have got your bot lane 10-0 and be 10-0 yourself. but your top lane is still going to blame you for him losing 1v1 and wanting to forfeit. And your laners, they are non-stop going to expect you to gank their lane permanently and constantly make up for all of their mistakes. The reality is jungle has become the game's default scapegoat. If your laners die to an obvious gank without using their wards, it's not that they played badly, it's that the enemy jungler is playing better than you are. Overcoming this and learning how to deal with it is by far the hardest part of playing jungle. The simple solution to all this though? Mute all. Or at the very least, the second anybody pings or says anything that's not constructive towards you, just mute them or mute their pings. You will play better, you won't second guess yourself, and you won't have to deal with it. One sad, funny, and weirdly kind of reassuring reality is a story told by one of the game's best junglers of all time, Broxa. He had just come off an incredible showing at Worlds and was widely considered one of the best junglers in the world. And yet, he gets home, queues up for solo queue, and still ends up getting absolutely flamed by his laners almost every single game. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how well you play, or even whose fault it actually was. If something goes wrong, the jungler is going to get blamed. And while not every single game you play is going to be like this, it's important to understand this so it doesn't get to you. You gotta have thick skin and just brush it off. And lastly, above all else, please do not let this side of League discourage you from playing jungle. If you found this guide helpful, you are absolutely going to love our newly updated 5-part Jungle Essentials course over at SkillCapped.com. How can I be so sure about this? Well, these are just a small sample of the exact strategies we taught Zot, our jungle student, to help him climb from bronze to diamond in under 90 days, which coupled with the rest of our amazing content, including our jungle clears, where you can master the fastest clear on every champion, or our commentary page where you can watch as challenger players guide you through every decision they make, teaching you exactly how to carry games on your champion in your elo. So if you want a clear path to improving as a jungler, be sure to check it all completely risk-free using the link in the description or pinned comment below. For now though, thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.